here with Bennett to talk about growing up in Westerville, being in the first class to go to the new Westerville High School, although we would call it Westerville South today. Talk to me a little bit about growing up here. How was it growing up here?
I was brought home from the hospital to 154 East Park Street, and then when I was about 4 or 5, my parents moved to the house at 160 East College Avenue, where my mother still lives today. Most of my life has been spent within that short confine, except for obviously driving to Columbus to go to work. And we raised a family here. I have grandchildren that will graduate from Westerville, that have graduated from Westerville schools, which would be 4 generations. The new high school, which is now
Hanby Elementary?
That was the new high school in 1924-25. I had an aunt that graduated from there to my wife's class, the class of 1961, that was in the first class that graduated from what is now Westerville South, and I was a year behind her in 1962.
Did you go all 4 years to Westerville South, or did part of the time you go to Hanby?
9th grade was then at what is now Hanby, old Westerville High School, grades 9 and 10, and then my junior year was when Westerville High School opened on Otterbein Avenue under the name Lowell High School, which was a short-lived name change that is documented only by newspaper accounts of the new school opening under the name Lowell. It opened in an unfinished state. There wasn't even a cafeteria.
So what did you guys do in terms of lunch then?
They contracted with somebody that prepared sandwiches that would be similar to what you would see being sold at construction sites today out of lunch wagons. And these sandwiches were brought and sold as something to take. Of course, bringing your lunch to school was still a common sort of thing, and people could still go home for lunch.
What were your favorite things about high school? What was it like? How would you compare it to like your grandchildren's experience?
With a class of in the vicinity of 170, 80 students, you would know everybody in your class and most of the people in your school. The whole community was smaller, and it was more close-knit community. I think the class my son was in was over 500, which there were only 800 in grades 9 through 12 when we were in school, so a whole lot different. And it's amazing when you talk to a lot of people that have moved into Westerville that a lot of folks that grew up here are still here, as opposed to their experience of wanting to grow up and get out of wherever it was they grew up.
Other changes you've seen in the city other than the schools?
When I was growing up, there was one police officer. If you wanted to get into a little mischief, you just had to know that he was at the other end of town. And you could maybe acquire a watermelon from in front of the Hartsook Market that is no longer around. One police officer with the contingency that we have today. E.J. Norris had a store, the part of the Holmes Hotel It had a barber shop in it. I remember Harold Croce cutting my hair in what was the corner barber shop for years and years and years, until I think it's now a coffee shop. The State Theater actually had movies. A.D. Kerfman ran that theater. And of course, he had been the publisher of Public Opinion for 25 years, up until A. Monroe Courtright took over. The cost of a movie was more than a quarter, but it wasn't the $6 or $8 or $10, $12 that we pay today to go to see a movie. Athletically, the debate about building Westerville North and dividing the community was something that was kind of traumatic, and there were contemplations of how much better Westerville would have been with just one high school and one team. The participation factor, however, I think won out, that, you know, well, we need to have more of our children involved. You know, you can have 22 in there. The rivalry that existed between Westerville South and Westerville North End was detrimental to the community. There was a period of years when they wouldn't, the school board did not have them play each other because it was destructive to the community. I think it's only been within the last 5 years that they've been able to participate and play against Westerville North and South without the rivalry that existed between the two as the community was divided. One of my experiences working in the community was to work at what was the only den of iniquity in Westerville. It was the Westerville Pool Hall that was owned by Claire Nutt and his family. His father had run the business before him, and Claire was a large man. It was local Westerville product, and known to be quite tight with his money. And the pool hall was only 4 tables. It was a venue where women were really not encouraged, or maybe even discouraged from going in. And no telephone in that place, so I wanted to hang out there when I was really not old enough. You were supposed to be 16, but I had a growth spurt and looked a little larger, and got in there when I was 15 and loved the game of pool. And then as a college student, I worked for Claire during the afternoons when he and some of his buddies would take off and go down to the racetrack. And
So why do you say it was a den of iniquity?
well, it was the only place that women really weren't allowed, and the language was a little crude, and it was a male-only venue. Smoking was really, you weren't supposed to smoke. A lot of people kind of had that idea. Otterbein College, if you were smoking, wearing college students used to have to wear a beanie. Freshmen, it was part of their official hazing policy, I think. Walking towards the school with a beanie smoking, you could be in trouble. It was not accepted because of the connection with the religious denomination that was connected with Otterbein at the time. It was just kind of a men's only. Primarily, I think, due to the crude language that was used in that environment. And the use of tobacco with the spittoons on the floor. That wasn't a place that you really wanted to have your mother come in. My mother did come in once to get a check cashed. She needed some cash, and knew that we could accommodate that. So
So is it pretty busy in the afternoons in there?
there was always a little bit of a college trade.
Was there gambling that went on in there?
Well, of course there was. There wasn't supposed to be, but the front table was where the good players played. If you were good enough to play on the front table, you had arrived.
Okay.
And there were some, at the time, quarter, half, 9-ball games or 50-cent and $1 games on that front table. And some of the businessmen around town that were pretty good pool shooters would play on the front table. I'll mention Jack Gould's name because he was one of the better players that, you know, if you could play with Jack, you had arrived.
So was there ever any drinking that went on also?
There was no alcohol available in there.
He wasn't selling alcohol.
No, there was no alcohol sold, only tobacco products. And you were supposed to be, you know, old enough to buy them. Part of the employees' remuneration was you could get a pack of cigarettes a day. Was part of your salary if you smoked. If you didn't, then so what? But Claire was smart enough to understand that unless he took inventory every day, you know, giving you a pack was probably easier than saying, no, you can't have any, and somebody's going to steal from him. So he was a sick old guy. He was well over 300 pounds and always had a marsh wheeling in his mouth.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Very interesting, Ben.